classical Marxist. I want to focus on how culture, as the milieu in which we live, is shaped by class and class struggle, and how this is represented in culture as artistic expression, particularly TV drama, which is what I'm going to focus on. Also, to clarify my method of analysis of culture, I do so by examining culture in terms of underlying ideological assumptions and overarching socio-historical structures. And I also believe in interrogating culture in terms of not only its presences, but its absences. In other words, to ask, if you're looking at artistic expression, not only what is there, but what's not there. With specific dramatic productions. But these are the general tendencies which I've discerned with respect to class. There's a tendency to represent the working class as people who don't work. There's a tendency to give disproportionate emphasis to a subculture of chronic unemployment, criminality, and alcohol or drug addiction. Now, this subculture does deserve to be dramatically represented. But my argument is it's disproportionately represented at the expense of the dramatization of the working class as people who work. There's also a tendency to balance towards a liberal point of view in representing class. That is, to privilege individualist solutions to social problems. There's a tendency to ignore, blur, or dissipate class divisions and class tensions. There's a failure to probe socio-economic structures. There's a failure to portray protest. And stunningly, there's a failure to portray the oligarchy and how they live in relation to other classes in the society. That's a particular failure. Now, if you compare them in terms of class consciousness, I would say that with all of the failures, I would say that British television drama is the strongest in terms of class consciousness. And why? I think to understand things like this, you need to look at the wider society and the class forces in the wider society. And I think in British society, you have stronger, clearer, more conscious class stratification. You have a monarchy and an aristocracy. You have a more developed bourgeoisie. You have much stronger traditions of working class militancy and trade union organization, and a more elaborate political left than either in America or Ireland. And I think that accounts for it to some degree. That even shocked me. I'm thinking of the Labour Party conference before the previous one, where Eamon Gilmore in his big speech kept saying one people. And that's not what the Labour Party should be representing. The Labour Party should be representing those who labour, and not be articulating this message that we're one people and that we're all in it together. I think the Occupy movement was some sort of attempt to break this narrative of being all in it together. Although just how weak the class consciousness of that even was is shown last week in Connolly, when they're up there demonstrating solidarity with this couple who were evicted from a huge mansion in 21. One of the basic problems with their city is, all along, it's still constructing the city as if it were a rural village. Carrickstown does not look like Dublin. Everybody, you know, drinks in the same pubs, shops in the same little shops. Almost everybody in it lives in each other's pockets, and they either own a local business or they work in the local businesses. You have very little sense of people coming and going and living in a wider city. It doesn't feel like Dublin. I've made this criticism of it a number of times, and you know, sometimes scriptwriters have seemed to address it, and then other times they fall back into the cliche of it. It is a soap opera cliche. So that's a big problem. So it's a very inadequate conceptualization of the city in the wider world. But even so, during the crisis, there's some characters particularly the building workers. Now, they're not wage workers in a strict sense, because this is what's happened in the construction industry. A lot of them have been forced into being very, small-time contractors. So you have a few of those characters in Fair City, such as Pete and Damien. And I think the best representation of the crisis came in showing the unraveling of a character like Damien Halpin, somebody just a decent working class lad with a strong work ethic, and just it showed the unraveling of his very character, the unraveling of almost all of his relationships when he found that he couldn't work, and I think that was the best portrayal of the impact of the crisis. It's shown it on other characters too, but I think this was the most powerful. Sometimes they do it in terms of rags to riches, and back again. Like this. If you look at the character of Bob Charles, for example, he's a wealthy businessman. Not only owned a local business, but had all of these properties in Bulgaria. And then with the crisis, it all crashed. And for a brief period of time, like he was living on the streets, totally homeless. And now he has a business again in Carrickstown. It's not really very believable. Although even that was some kind of attempt to show the impact of the crisis. In Ireland, about class in recent years was done during the boom. It was a drama called Prosperity, which was done in 2007. And it was about the Celtic Tiger years from the point of view of those who lived outside the prosperity of the Celtic Tiger. Basically, there were 4 plays. They were all set in Dublin in one day, and each of them foregrounded one character. And then the same characters would be there in the background in the other plays. But also, never foregrounded, but always there was the prosperity. You saw the building sites, the shopping malls, you saw how other people were living. Well, these 4 characters, mostly fairly inarticulate. They weren't even characters that could, articulate a concept such as prosperity. They simply wandered the streets with, nowhere to go and nothing to do, and were kind of dazed at everything going on around them. And yet the drama was written in such a skillful way that the script itself, in terms of the contrasts, even in terms of their inability to articulate, it somehow articulated what Ireland was like. And I think that's the key in Ireland in recent years. But compare it with The Wire, and you see everything that's wrong with love-hate. It's a really, really myopic examination of the drug culture in Ireland. Whereas with The Wire, you see the drug culture of the time, but you see it in relation to the class structure. You see it in terms of the decline of organised labour in the city. You see it in terms of the family life and the education system, and in the politics and the media, for that matter. You have this panoramic view where it's set in a context, and you understand it in a way that you never could if it's simply focused on, the drug dealers themselves. And I think that we need a TV drama of crisis. I think we need a Strumpet City for our time. I think we need one that shows all sections of our society in their real relation to each other. I want one that shows us how characters such as Shawnee Fitzpatrick and David Drum and their successors, and how are they living now? One that shows how the lives of people with a work ethic are unraveling for lack of work. Show how the strict public service is demoralized by trying to cope with downsized staff cuts. Show the dumbing down of our schools and universities to serve the needs and mentalities of the mystified markets. Show the newsrooms that are betraying the traditions of public service broadcasting. And, I think we have the writers who could do this. If I could do it, I'd put together a team of writers, such as Jerry Stemper, Joe O'Connor, Mark O'Halloran, who did Prosperity, and throw Turlock in while we're at it, and see what we get. With a brief to show the society as we're living now. Because there's so much in our society, especially in this time of crisis, that's absolutely crying out for dramatic representation. because there are things that drama can do that news and current affairs and documentary can't. I mean, I think we should take up some of the stories that arise in our news and current affairs, but transpose them to do what drama can do better, probe character, make imaginative leaps where the evidence is lacking, or where the evidence is there, people are paralyzed with the chilling effect of libel. And I think that series and serials have the best potential to explore ongoing processes and not just isolated events. So we need to create alternatives, such as Dole TV is doing in its way. But I think we also need to demand better of our mainstream media, particularly RTE, because it belongs to us. So in response, to conclude, in response to the question that's posed for this seminar, our society is in a deep economic, social, and cultural crisis. Yet the majority of cultural workers appear to have little to say about it. Why? My answer is, this is the paradox of contemporary capitalism. Never has there been such a totalizing, powerful system, and yet never has there been such paralysis of systemic thinking. Contemporary thinkers and artists are like deer in the headlights. Writers are dazed at the task of conceptualizing contemporary experience, so they tend to take the easy road and recycle the old plots and the old cliches and to give the old excuses. The dominant ideologies of postmodernism and neoliberalism